Whatever you like. Like. You make me lose it. You make me lose it. When the beat goes off, we bang to the
Tell me, are there any specific tasting notes you're looking for?
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reality Reimagined. I am Patrick Johnson, CEO of Rock Paper Reality, and I'm going to be your host for today's show, where we are going to focus on AI and XR gaming. Next. Awesome. So we have got a full agenda for you today. Basically, we are going to 5 minutes of me, 10 minutes of Omid Sinai, who is going to be talking through some industry trends around MR and gaming, followed by Preston Platt, who is going to do a deep dive into some of our MR games, how he builds them using AI, and give you a sneak peek into some of the cool things to come. Then we've got a fireside chat with some brilliant minds in the space, and ending with some Q&A. And so to do the Q&A, we need questions. To get the questions, you got to drop them in the comments. So maybe to start out, I know some of you have already been dropping them in there, which is awesome. Introduce yourself, say where you're from. I'm currently calling from Glasgow, Scotland, and looking forward to meeting some of you today. A little bit about Rock Paper Reality for those who don't know. We've been in the space for about 13 years. Preston and I got our start at a company called ODG, where we were doing some pioneering technology for smart glasses. So we've been doing the MR gaming for quite some time. Very excited that the smart glasses and head-worn is starting to actually make some moves finally in the space. We also do some strategy work at Rock Paper Reality. We've done tons of 3D and animation and had some patents along the way. Next. Done work for a lot of household names, done some mixed reality experiences for some companies you'll probably recognize. Ben & Jerry's, as you saw in our demo reel, Microsoft. Did a really cool multiplayer head-worn experience for the Padres, F1, and we're going to share a little bit of that coming soon. Love the dramatic pauses. And a little bit about where we play. So we do a lot of events. We love events. We think there's a lot of ROI to be delivered in events, especially when it comes to MR and gaming with brands. We also do places. So last month we did a show with Google, and that was all focused on the work we did with Google Maps for the Paris Olympics and bringing to life the Eiffel Tower and the Seine, and being able to kind of relive some of these places that were from one of the original Olympics in Paris. We do a little bit on the work side, but really what we love to do are games. That's what we would do all day, every day if someone paid us. So if you're out there and you're looking to pay us that would be amazing. Please reach out. So that's going to be today's topic. And then probably next month, we'll be doing a little bit on events and maybe some experiential marketing there. All right, let's keep it going. Few shout outs before we turn it over to Omid. Augmented World Expo. If you haven't got your tickets, absolutely should get them. Want to give them a shout out. We've been going there for over 10 years. And I also run AW Unite SF, which is the largest AR meetup group in the world. And this year they've got some pretty cool programs that you can apply to. One of them is the gaming hub, which I think will be a really good fit for some of you out there, whether you're just getting started or you've been doing this thing for the last 20 years. There are some opportunities for you there. Allows you to showcase the games that you're developing, meet new people, take a stage, showcase it in front of anybody that will listen, and be able to try some great experiences along the way. The Builders Nexus is a place where if you are an XR startup, you will be able to do some networking, do some speed networking, but also be able to hopefully meet some investors. And if you're an investor out there, you'll be able to meet some amazing new XR startups. Last thing is I get a lot of newsletters, probably 50 million a week without exaggeration. And there's probably two that I always read. One is the AWE Weekly, and the second one is the Immersive Wire by Tom Fisk. I highly recommend you go and subscribe to Tom's newsletter. It's fantastic. Always trying to give shout outs to the stuff that we love in this space. So go show Tom some love. And these are our speakers for the panel today. So we've got Andy Fidel, creative strategist at Spatial Networks, Jeff Gipson, creative director at Operative Games, Isaac Seah, senior product manager for XR at Unity, which is where we do most of our game development, Preston Platt. And now I'm going to go hand it over to Omid to kick things off with the industry trends.
Cool. Thanks, Pat. Hello, everyone. My name is Omid. I lead up strategy at Rock Paper Reality. So stoked to have you all here today. We're going to fly through this section up front, talking a little bit about some of the industry trends that we're seeing at the intersection between AI and XR. What does it mean for development? What does it mean for the future of XR content? And then I'll be handing it over to Preston to talk a little bit more about his workflow and his pipeline. So why even use AI besides the fact that it's a big buzzword right now and everyone is asking about what you're doing with AI and whether you're doing the next best thing? When we think about it, we're looking for tools that are helping us across three key buckets. It's either improving efficiency and productivity, increasing creativity, whether in the content we're developing or even just in the ultimate player experience and the entire gameplay, or it's helping with quality, whether that's highly photorealistic looking content, better story arcs and narratives. It's got to deliver on one of these three things, and hopefully a mix of all of them. Now, the industry, I don't know about you guys, but there are startups popping up left and right across AI and games. This is honestly not even all of them, just one of the better example market maps from a venture capital firm called Hartman Capital. As you can see, there's hundreds of startups across a variety of different buckets, whether they're helping you with concepting or in 2D or actually developing 3D assets, whether they're being used across your entire gameplay with AI NPCs or agents in the actual game, or whether they're picking apart different pieces of the puzzle like animation and rigging or speech and audio. So there's one thing, and I'm excited to talk about this a little bit on the panel as well, is, you know, as a studio trying to move fast and keep learning and keep growing, you can't possibly test out every tool that's out there. That's like a full-time job, but you do need to stay up to date and in the loop with what's going on, and make sure you at least have a pulse on what is starting to work, what is moving into production, what is yielding good results. We've played with a lot of different tools on here for sure. Preston will talk about a few that he's used for 3D and where he's seeing some benefits there. We're definitely using a couple on here for other use cases like Gaussian splats, like Luma AI. And in the NPC and agents, we've deployed a couple projects with InWorld. We've also tested out tools like Convey, and all of them are honestly really impressive and for being product ready and able to go to market with. I'd say bottom right corner when it comes to this game builder category, not as relevant typically to a game studio or someone who's got a team of 3D artists, UX UIers, and developers already building. That's more going towards the UGC side of things, and definitely exciting innovations happening in UGC, but just not as much when you're the studio that wants full control over everything. When it comes to speech, audio, we've definitely really enjoyed working with tools like 11 Labs. That's been a big part of our workflow with InWorld, and sometimes just making games that are AI audio driven. And then rigging and animation, honestly, some of these tools are also embedded in, or some of the main tools you're using like Maya, 3ds Max, Unity, etc., are already coming a long way with making these improvements naturally and embedded. But we do use things like Move AI for some of the experiences we create. And I don't know why Spline is in the video animation category as much, but we do use that for some prototyping, concepting with our designers, etc. So would love to hear in the chat as well different tools that you guys have found pretty useful, what people are using, what people are testing out. There are tons of them. This is not the full list, but hopefully gives you some to think about. And as we're thinking about what's ready to be used today, where is it actually being used? I think based on some of my comments and what I was just sharing there, a lot of it's mostly happening in the concepting and planning stage and pre-production, where we're using tons of generative AI for 2D mockups. And there's one more on there that I forgot to call out, like Leonardo AI, that helps with just kind of keeping that consistent theme when you're doing those mockups. But not when it comes to production, you'll see what Preston's doing a little bit there. That's more on the gameplay and programming side. But still, a lot of the tools I think are being done in the earlier stages of development right now. Okay, so how does this start to impact content? It's cool to be able to build faster. It's cool to be able to build emergent storytelling games. But so what's it for? Does it mean we're just gonna have a ton more content that people are gonna have to split their times across? Is it gonna be more impactful content? Is it gonna be more accessible content? We don't have all the answers, but this is definitely something we're thinking about as we consider what direction is the future of immersive content and mixed reality as well going. Of course, there's the development tools that are going to help us get there. There's also the hardware and the devices that are going to make it more accessible and help increase the reach across a larger audience. But a couple trends that we're keeping an eye on and thinking about is when you look at traditional gaming, when you look at the $300 billion industry that is larger than film and music combined, actually 85% of all of that revenue comes from free-to-play games. And obviously, they're not exactly free. I mean, they're free to get started, but then you've got tons of ads or you've got a lot of in-app purchases, and that's where all the spending comes in. And that's what's completely taken over the mobile industry. Our friends at Unity built a massive empire on kind of the success of mobile gaming and the ad networks that help power that. But we're not seeing that as much in the immersive space or in XR. And we think there's a few reasons there. So, we looked at a lot of the top titles or all the titles across the VR database, and about 36% of those games on the Quest Store are free to play. But when we talk about free in immersive, it's very different than what free looks like in mobile, right? Because there's a big ad network in mobile when it comes to free games, and there's a lot more ads being distributed or displayed across banners and the like. Whereas in immersive and VR content in games, some of your most successful titles like Yeeps and Gorilla Tag are all free actually, but they're mostly monetizing and finding success off of in-app purchases. Pokemon Go in the AR space was very much the same. So you find that in immersive, some of the most successful titles that are able to monetize are still going to be those large open world MMO type games that are more for social networks and gathering and people using this virtual world as a space to connect and interact. Not as much the types of games that might be like your Candy Crush or your Tower Defense or your quick game that you play on the train on the way to work. And so one thing that we're thinking about a lot is there a future where there are those types of games that might be easier to consume and quicker to consume, or fun, quick interactions with your friends that are more social? You know, it is, I think right now, a little bit of a barrier to get people to toss on a headset and get into these fully immersive games. But if these headsets are becoming used a bit more frequently or becoming lighter weight, different form factor, will you have more of those easier to play and games out there? So something we're thinking about. And as I touched on with Unity and some of what they're doing with at the ad network around it, it's not just going to be the cost of content development coming down that's going to drive more free-to-play content into the space, right? I mean, it'll certainly help make more content out there, and that's great, but there's other levers that need to kind of shift in the space between hardware and monetization models, et cetera, that'll make this more accessible. Right now in immersive, I would say in-app purchases, like I said, really the only proven model. And companies like Gorilla Tag making $100 million on it are playing that game very, very well. But advertisements, even there's companies like Anzu that are doing that in AAA gaming for consoles, but it hasn't quite landed as naturally, and might not even be a good thing for immersive. And so figuring out what the right native, advertising may be easier in virtual reality. What does that look like in mixed reality? And I think there's a lot of these unknowns that we're starting to explore as this content becomes more readily available. The last piece on content before we get a bit into the dev workflow is thinking about what this means for brands as well. We are seeing brands like ASICS or Lego bring their own immersive content to the market and reach those younger audiences, partly because they know the audience is there, there's enough headsets out there, and also because the cost of development is coming down. For us, the cost has definitely come down enough to the point where we're working with brands to build like a mixed reality game just for a single event, right? And that's an 8 to 10, if we're lucky, a 12-week timeline to get ready for an event where you're launching a game that people needs to draw them in from all the other distractions and excitement at an event, but it's totally doable. We're seeing a lot more of it, and we're seeing a lot of benefits from it. And one of those examples was a game we made for Lenovo Think Reality. I'm going to skip through the video, which might start playing here. And so we can actually get into a little bit of the pipeline process that Preston's been working on with some of his AI tools. So with that, I will bring Preston up to the stage and switch it over to his presentation. Cool.
Perfect. Yeah, we're good.
Right, all yours.
Awesome. All right. Last time we talked geospatial. Today we were talking games. 10 minutes, so we're going to go quick. All right. So overview of what we're going to talk about today. Is AI ready for XR games? Currently with all the APIs that are out there with OpenXR, can we get things moving today? What are the limitations? How impactful can it be on the production process? How many different factors can we hit? Basically, this is 3 months of my dev work, R&D, kind of packed into this 10 minutes. So To start it off, overachievers, again, huge shout outs to my team, Alex, Anna, Norik. You're going to see their work throughout the rest of this thing. Just huge shout out to them. You'll hear me reference them kind of moving forward. All right. So the main kind of premise of all this, can we use AI to build a game in a week, right? That was kind of the first R&D project. I did this about 3 to 4 months ago. So some of this data is a little skewed based on, how things have adapted today in Grok 3 and O1 preview, O1 Pro. So that's the whole idea, right? Build it in a week. Notice here, development only, not for getting it into the store. That was a whole other process that took about 2 weeks, but Apple approved bonking weasels with a shovel, so that was cool. But here are the requirements, right? 1 week-ish of dev work. I wanted it to be a Quest and AVP project. I wanted it to be all in one single project. Didn't want to have a merge split, all those other things that can cause production woes down the line. As far as the 3D design goes, Alex had 4 days to do this, which was crazy. For the code, I wanted most of it to be AI. The UI design as well, tried to kind of push this into an AI category, and then completely open XR. Right. And then obviously, as I alluded to earlier, deploy on both stores. So one thing that's kind of cool about this, I think, is that the core products used are super attainable, right? I have Maya in here, obviously, that kind of has its own price tag to it, but you could use Blender, for instance. I really think that this nowadays is so attainable for anybody to do in this kind of single dev environment or one other person, right? But let's talk about getting into using ChatGPT for code, right? You can't just tell it to make a game for you. At least you shouldn't, right? There is a thought process that you could go down where you could effectively write out, what you want to do and thought exercise through it. Maybe use deep research to come up with other ideas. Great, but I would not use the approach of like, yo, AI, make me a game, right? What I do is kind of really take a game perspective to this. Write out each of these scripts that you are going to be doing. Make them all make sense together, kind of roadmap this thing, right? The last thing you want to do is kind of progress through this in a way that then you're piecing parts together and you're trying to get ChatGPT to like understand it. Again, probably that's where you shift off and say, okay, I'm going to go write this myself. For the prompting, I use kind of just a basic approach here where I tell it the environment that I'm using. So C Sharp, for instance, for this, I constantly give it the overall game idea, right? Because a lot of the times AI will give you go back, just ideas or suggestions. And if you give it your overall goal, it always helps. Obviously what the script does, and then always give external scripts context, context to these external scripts that you have, like every other script that you have, because it gives it agency to change those scripts for you in a way that could be meaningful or maybe something that you don't know you should be doing, right? Now, I did notice when you go through one chat log, right, which is saving all that data, all that chat history, I noticed hallucinations start to happen because ultimately this chat log where you've changed a script 100 times with your best friend ChatGPT and you've had this beautiful journey, it starts to hallucinate after it thinks that maybe old parts of the code are what it needs. Ways to fix that. I wrote a JSON script that would just take my scripts, or a Python script that would just take all my scripts in my scripts folder and just turn that into a JSON file that would have it, understand and just read and then continue on, right? So really cool way to do that. Highly suggest it. I think it's super fun too. And I have, yes, you could do this better because I'm sure there are AI nerds out there that are like, yeah, I could have my own AWS environment where I've written a Lambda function that does this in a Bedrock space and I actually have a RAG system. Cool, great. I'm going fast, right? As far as building on devices and using AI code in an XR environment, nightmare, right? Obviously, I've listed this out. Anybody that does dev work already knows this. This is specifically AVP, but you're looking at about 10 to 15 minutes build time, right? So again, getting into the code process here of like using AI to help you code. And I know there's code-based DIs. It's just, this is about ChatGPT or Grok 3, right? In this XR environment. Can take a while. My best code practices for this, create a dev environment that also mimics your editor environment, right? So in this case, built a floor, tagged it as floor the same ways that my OpenXR or Mesh Manager would do it. And so then I can play out this, in this context, it's the weasel spawner and how it's spawning around the environment in a contextual way, right? It's not spawning too close to the player. It's going behind the player in certain situations. It's not going next to certain things, tagged couch, etc. For the UI, we decided to go with Leonardo. Alex and I played with a bunch of different options. Alex played through a bunch, to be honest with you. And as Omid alluded to earlier, we're always constantly checking new AI tools, even though there's one every single day, it seems like. Leonardo did really good for the UI. Obviously, as you can tell, not very usable, but you throw that into Photoshop, you start messing around, maybe you up-res it, you got something pretty usable, which is really, really cool. Wanted to show off the cool 3D work real fast just because Alex crushed it, right? That's sick. I'm hearing oohs and ahs. Again, amazing work. Just rad. No AI, but just awesome. And then to round that all out, right, this is what was kind of at the end of that week-long experience. You've got a functional game, you got leveling, you've got it in your surroundings. It's using a bunch of meshing and everything else to spawn in, smart ways. And it's just a fun little game, right? Again, not breaking bounds here, not creating the most amazing thing in the entire world, but for a week-long dev project, it's pretty darn cool. Again, pretty darn cool, but can we take it further? Yes, we can. Let's do it in 24 hours. So I took this on as kind of a next little challenge within this AI process of kind of personalized gamification. Now, obviously, Figment XR, there's lots of like UGC-based content creation tools, right, that exist all over the place. They're awesome, but this is kind of your own personalized journey, right, that you can create from the ground up, which I think is super awesome. Again, requirements for this, 24 hours, AVP. I think this actually, the dev took like 12 hours, to be honest with you, or the whole process. I wanted to test Grok, specifically Grok 3, which is amazing, and ON Pro. Try to do it all in AI code, obviously OpenXR, and make sure that it's actually a playable game. Inspiration, I was in Bali, needed my next Airbnb, and I found this gem, which was insane. It had this door that opened up to a 15-foot fall, which was concerning. But I thought, that's crazy. But what would be super cool is if I put like a cannon launcher there and launched out into this rice field, which I thought was pretty sick. So, the age-old, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Getting into the idea, if you've ever been to Southeast Asia and been to any beach, there's fireworks constantly. And as someone that's trying to sit there and dev all night and you're just hearing people have fun in fireworks, that was kind of interesting. But I thought bringing those fireworks with this rice paddy, maybe we put barrels and we launch fire things into those and blow off fireworks, and that's your game. Cool, whatever. We're having fun, right? ChatGPT search was super cool for this. Again, I'm just flexing little things like where do I optimize the process? Found me these assets that I ended up liking that I thought could fit in this space quite nicely. I did use some generative 3D to give it a shot. My favorite still is Trippo 3D. Didn't end up using it. I think we're not there yet. We're close though. I think in a solid month, it's going to be a scary territory. But, if I had to pick my favorite right now, Trippo. Wanted to show a little bit of like what I do in the 3D process, take all these into the same kind of Maya environment where I light and kind of bring them into the same world. Obviously, I'm still doing some tweaks to the 3D that are just stylistic approaches that I think are worthwhile. Again, the code, this took maybe 30 minutes to an hour, right, to get all that done, which is crazy. Again, same code practices, best practices, trying to keep this out of the XR environment, mimic those XR-based approaches. But yeah, just keep it in editor. I don't know why that's not going. Okay, cool. The result, me playing this crackhead game off this 15-foot balcony. Being in a Vision Pro through pass-through, walking next to that was absolutely terrifying. But yeah, it was a really fun game. I ended up sitting there playing it for quite a while. Just kind of launching things into these buckets. Fireworks go up. You can see a little bit of the meshing. I'm having some meshing issues for the occlusion, but it's all dynamic occlusion based on the meshing of the surrounding. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Overall, I did want to kind of preface this because I do feel like the industry is missing a bit of AVP development in general. The 10K price tag is tough, right? But I wanted to shout out Unity. Unity freaking rocks, right? OpenXR interactions, and polyspatial together, you can build in OpenXR with OpenXR interactions and port in that polyspatial layer like right at the very end, and you can have yourself a really good experience. So just wanted to caveat that. But yeah, to kind of move forward from this, right, in that endeavor, I wanted to show off a little bit, and I'm hoping this is not too loud, of kind of what we're working on now. This is something I've been doing for about a month and a half, I'd say. Yeah, check it out. It's always so crackhead. I love watching that. Shout out to Norik. Norik created that in Unreal. But yeah, so to kind of bring it all together, right? What I've been working on is a game with Anna, who I called out earlier, that is a Vision Pro Quest multiplayer compatible game. That's a tower defense game called Defenderella. Yeah, and it's been just like a really fun adventure, bridging in all of these AI components, especially with multiplayer and netcode. Yeah, it's been really fun. So hopefully that was helpful in any sort of way, or at least a fun journey along the process. But yeah, super excited to see where this all goes. It's definitely becoming the Wild West. Thank you. Did I do 10 minutes? Was that close?
Nailed it. Nailed it.
Yeah?
That was a little fast
Adios.
to get through all of that, but you got it done. Well done.
Gave it my best shot.
Cool. Thank you, Preston. I will send
leave.
you backstage, and then we're going to slow down a little bit, bring on our guest speakers and panelists, and get a little bit less technical than that last conversation. And we'll be talking a little bit more about how AI and XR are being used in other use cases, and how other people are engaging with it. So we're joined by three incredible experts. They're all pushing the boundaries of immersive storytelling. Maybe they're building some of the tools you're using. Some are even redefining the meaning of connection in a virtual world. We've got Andy Fidel. She's a creative strategist, event producer, and the CEO of Spatial Networks. She actually coined the term spatial networking back in 2016, and she's been shaping how brands and communities build immersive experiences in XR. So with 10 plus years of immersive, 15 plus years of social, Andy's been helping turn digital spaces into hubs for real connections. So excited to think about how AI and XR is going to be impacting just kind of that connection and that community in the immersive space. Then we've got Isaac Seah. He's a product manager for XR at Unity, and he's been leading efforts to empower creators like all of us in augmented, virtual, and mixed reality. He's got a decade in real-time 3D technologies, and he's helped ship tools for game dev, visualization, large-scale sims. At Unity, some of his recent work that some of you may have worked with is anything with support for Vision OS, Quest devices, and their latest Unity multiplayer mixed reality template. And then we've got Jeff Gipson. Jeff's a director, creative leader known for blending storytelling and emerging technologies. He's led incredible creative projects in XR, AI, even theme parks, and other emerging technologies, working at companies like Pixar, Disney, and Universal. This includes one of Disney's first VR shorts, Cycles, and he's worked on films like Frozen and Moana. And now, as creative director at Operative Games, he's shaping the future of interactive experiences by merging world-class storytelling with AI-driven characters. So I'm super excited to dive in. Thanks all of you guys for joining us today. So I think some of the first questions I want to start with, coming off of Preston's talk, is a bit about the use of AI in XR development. And I'm curious, maybe starting with Jeff and kind of your studio, where are you guys predominantly looking to use AI tools in your process today, whether for development or beyond?
Mhm. Well, I think Preston did an amazing job of showing how a lot of studios currently are using them. One thing I do think that's interesting, how you kind of mentioned at high level, is the planning element. He showed a lot of the development and he showed 3D assets and artwork and things like that. But I think the planning is another area that, just to think about. Planning is key, especially if you're going to use these AI technologies and move quickly. I think a plan using ChatGPT, using Grok, something like that is really helpful. Another one that he didn't mention is Move AI in mocap. I think pre-vising animation is really, really, really useful for us, especially in XR where your space is part of the medium. And so getting those answers quickly with something like Move AI is awesome. But we use a lot of the 2D art, a lot of the 3D art, a lot of ChatGPT, the Groks, things like that as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because maybe if you're like Preston doing a quick single developer indie proof of concept, you can move fast. You don't have too many cooks in the kitchen making those decisions. But what I found, probably what people spend a lot of time on, is typically the decision making, the approvals, mocking things up, storyboarding, etc. And just to be able to use some of these tools to speed that process up, get those decisions made, does help with that process quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, Isaac, maybe on the Unity side, I know you're developing a lot more widely for mixed reality and some of those tools, but is your team at all keeping a pulse on and looking out for, I guess, getting requests, maybe even for areas where AI is kind of interest for developers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we take a step back and we look at the overall industry today, 52% of developers have actually worked with companies that are using AI, right? So we know that workflows with AI has penetrated developers' workspaces. We know that folks are generally interested to understand how we can use AI ethically, and in a natural way to do things like efficiency, creativity, and quality, just like you mentioned in your opening slides. Now, one of the interesting things we've seen at Unity and in some of our products, Unity Muse and Sentis, one of the things that we've noticed is that besides being productive with AI, it's really about injecting AI into the runtime. So we've seen developers like Trip, figuring out how to inject AI into some of their breathing exercises so that they can make their visual experience of the application blend with that breathing exercise. We've seen people use AI for smarter gameplay so that you have better NPCs within the experience, better interactions with bosses within the experience. So more and more, I think, beyond just AI and XR, I think AI is sort of creeping into game development as a whole, right? Whether it's in the prototyping phase, whether it's in the production phase, or whether it's in the runtime, we're starting to see examples of it showing up more and more.
Yeah, that's interesting that you hit on that side of it as well, because it's certainly, there are benefits on the development side, and that's going to be great, and that'll move things forward. But to that point, and kind of what we were saying about, like, okay, so you have so much content at the end of the day. So what is it? Better content? Are people enjoying it? Do people want to play it? And Andy, I guess I'm kind of curious, since with maybe some of the shared spaces or virtual worlds, and if you have thoughts, one, if you're seeing AI on the experiential side. So are there experiences that you might go into where you're noticing that you're interacting with AI in some way, shape, or form? But then two, is it a good thing? Is it improving the experience, do you think, or is there a risk of going down that path as well?
Yeah, I would say that AI is definitely popping up in our virtual spaces and worlds in different ways. I think the most obvious one that we've been seeing from the get-go is just cooler and better NPCs. There definitely have gotten points where I've interacted and connected with an NPC just thinking it was another user. And I'm like, oh no, you're not real. I want to be your friend. So there's a lot of opportunity there, especially I think in terms of like personalizing the experience, right? Like maybe my choices are carried through the gameplay. Like maybe it changes how people react with me. So definitely a lot of opportunities, I think, in NPCs.
Yeah.
Also seeing a lot of like in-game creation tools. So like just worlds where we can generate things with other people. That's a really cool,
Yeah.
like maybe team building experience. On the negative side, where I'm seeing NPCs, and this is where like I'd love to steer people away, especially in virtual spaces, is kind of using them as fillers. Like let's say you're at a concert and there's just like a bunch of fake people dancing. It's really eerie in virtual reality because we are just so prone and used to being hyper social. So if I see someone in one of these virtual spaces, the first thing I want to do is to connect. And so if I get this person who's just like not reacting, my first impression is, oh, maybe their audio isn't working. So I'm trying to be helpful, or I think you're ignoring me. Don't put fake people. Like if they're an NPC, like a bartender, like it really, I feel like doesn't have to be written, I'm AI, but like something that just kind of triggers people to understand what is organic and what is not organic as fast as possible so that we know how to engage with organic and non-organic beings.
Yeah, there's an interesting intersection there between kind of like the UGC and then maybe these AI NPCs where, I think a lot of people that are currently exploring and working with AI NPCs are being very thoughtful about how it's enhancing the game experience and where it's going to be applicable and where it's going to be relevant. But what if you made it as easy that was actually like a UGC capability and people were just creating like bots to toss around this, and fill this world with right now. Now you're like, okay, great. Some 12-year-old made this kind of annoying like character that isn't fun to talk about and so or talk to. And so it is, I think, an important power to wield and one that like when we have been testing some of these tools and working with it, we're actually going and we're talking to narrative designers. And I think there was definitely a period of like, our narrative designers worried that this is going to replace them and they won't have jobs for this kind of a thing. But we found how important that narrative designer is in that like character an AI NPC character role, because you have to define every part of that as well. And I'm curious, Jeff, if that kind of if you guys have found that experience as you're going through and thinking about each character's purpose as well, and not just kind of tossing them in because it's so easy now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that Andy said an important word, which is connection. I think like just a general vanilla NPC is kind of boring. Like, yeah, you can talk to him, but it's like talking to ChatGPT, just a bot. So I think for me, it's like, how do we find this character? How do I connect with a character where I have a meaningful conversation based on their backstory, based on their written experience? And so that's where I do think that narrative designers, writers are a key part of this process, especially as what we're creating. And what's interesting too is like Meta tried this, right? They tried to do their AI influencers and there was backlash because they didn't feel real. And so I think there's also something, especially when you're in VR and you go up to these characters, and Andy mentioned is like you go to these characters and they're fake, but even if that's an NPC and they feel weird, it's even more eerie. It's kind of like that movie Megan a little bit, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is super creepy and super weird. So I think finding a way where, and part of it comes through performance and animation, and then part of it comes from that the AI, the LLM driving the conversation, and having something that feels natural. There's cadences in our conversations that an AI just doesn't pick up. So I think finding those ways to drive that LLM to have these subtleties is it's tricky because it's going to just want to feel robotic. But I think that's something that's as an opportunity to really explore. And that's kind of the work I'm most excited about, is finding these ways to connect with people. Because it's, and then same with VR, we're seeing multiplayer experiences and things like that because people want to be around other people. They want to connect. We want to, whether it's an AI character or another friend, we want to connect and we want to have these relationships. And so I think using AI to do that in a thoughtful way is interesting.
Yeah, just gonna jump in and build on top of Jeff's comment here. I think the what we have for smart NPCs today, you put a model into the runtime and you start hearing automated generated scripts, right? And these scripts are hyper customized to the context that you give to the NPCs. But I think what's natural in a lot of social spaces within virtual worlds is the fact that you can interact with more than one subject. you can interact with multiple people in outspace in VR chat. You can interact with a bunch of people in Rec Room, right? So getting to that point where we can have a bunch of NPCs talking to each other naturally and talk to a bunch of different individuals naturally, I think that's the next step in terms of interactivity between whether it's an NPC or whether it's an actual player.
Definitely. We were joking about one of our next panels, including an AI NPC character as one of the guests on the panel, and then see if they can kind of go back and forth with the crew and keep up with everyone. And so, it does open up a lot of areas for things to potentially go wrong. And then that's also the difference between kind of AI being deployed in the experience and within gameplay versus AI being used to improve along the way. I mean, Preston called out where he noticed hallucinations happening with some development and where he really needed to like lock things down and control where it was being applied. But there's a human in the loop. He can be involved with that. He can review that and make sure the finished product is locked down and works to his expectations. It gets tougher when you go and you're deploying AI in your game and you're not too sure how to monitor what's going to be happening with that. And I know we've looked at some projects where you'll create like an AI photo selfie and allow people to post that online, but like you need people there to moderate it as well, because you're not sure what kind of content people will create, or if you've got some character in your game representative of a real person, and people are going and trying to have funny conversations with that person and then post those online, you run into a lot of potential risk when you've got that out there.
When I was working at Disney, there was always this conversation of, we should have Anna talking, or we should have Elsa talking to audiences. Who wouldn't love that? But the way the technology is the hallucinations are going off the back rails, or Elsa would never say that. Anna would never say that. And so I think that as these large studio come thinking about their IP, trying to connect with characters, it is a big concern of like, how do we keep guardrails so that there isn't, Andy mentioned the awesomeness of user-generated content, or being able to really modify and have this unique experience with using AI. But there's also like, well, that would never be in Arendelle. That would never be in, Shrek Swamp, whatever it might be. And so there's finding the sweet spot where you allow people to generate things, but also maintain guardrails or story is really interesting.
Yeah. The risk might not be worth it right now. I know Lego, for example, came out and kind of publicly said, we will not be using AI to generate any images. We'll not be using AI to interact with characters. And it's kind of a wait and watch and see how some of the innovators, like those of us, go out there and test things out and break things and see what we learn, right? One thing I've been thinking about, like that slide we had with all these logos of startups popping up. It could be a full-time job, like for a small studio like ourselves, it could be a full-time job to keep a pulse on all the tech that's coming to market, how quickly it's coming out. I'm curious, maybe Isaac, for example, like how do you guys manage what's worth looking at and evaluating with sticking to product timelines and roadmap and just building as well?
Yeah, with with most products or software companies out there, including Unity, right? We kind of want to make sure that we are addressing our developers' pain points in mostly in real time, right? A lot of the feedback that we get from a month to month basis is about, hey, what are the workflows that you can help us with? How can we onboard our new teams onto the projects? How do we start thinking about bringing our prototype into a production quality experience that can be shipped, right? So those are all the short to medium term things that we want to focus on and we focus on. And then there is also things that happen more broadly at the industry level, right? We're talking about the release of Apple Vision Pro, which was a huge moment for the industry. We are talking about more further out incumbents like Snapchat with their spectacles, right? So these are all the different players that could potentially really disrupt the industry in terms of their form factor, in terms of the types of ecosystems that they may be building. So especially for our space in XR, it's been rapidly developing over the last 10 years. If you throw back, Google used to have this product called Google Cardboard, right, which is turn every phone into a VR headset. And all the way now, Google just announced Android XR, right? It's sort of an evolution of their game and evolution of how they want to tackle this industry. And so our job, most of our jobs is to really focus on how can we continue to support this ecosystem that's rapidly growing, whether it's on the game side, whether it's on the industry side, what are the new use cases that are coming out, and is our software really fit for purpose in these different spaces? And so it's sort of like these cycles of evaluation, execution, and figuring out what people like.
Yeah, you've got to be able to react quickly. You've got to be able to move quickly. It's hard to have the right pulse on what is noise, what is needed. But to your point, starting with your customer, which is the developers in a lot of this case, and trying to understand what exactly the developers want and being able to move quickly is key. And then curious, like on the studio side and the game development side, Jeff, I mean, at a certain point, you'll never launch your game if you're kind of shifting products and shifting your tool set. And do you get to a certain point where you just say, we got to run with this, this is what we're using? And are you concerned, knowing that a lot of these are early stage startups and AI is still kind of cementing and proving itself right now?
Yeah, and I think it's on a macro scale what Preston showed. Preston said at some point we have to move. We got to move forward, and it's the same. When you're in production on anything, it's like at some point we've got to stop the testing and just get rubber meets the road and start making stuff. But I think it's about being adaptable as well. It's not locking yourself into something where it's like, well, now we cannot pivot after we've launched this game, or hey, there's a phase 2 and now we're locked in. We can't pivot in or out of anything else than this system that we've locked ourselves in. So I think it's a little bit of that, and that's what's I think what's exciting is that we're seeing the rise of AA game studios, the indies kind of coming up, and they're a little more agile than the big, tentpole pillar studios because they can be so quick and dirty, and seeing Preston create, 2 games that are really badass in such a short amount of time is, just speaks to the power of these tools and the ability to just move quickly and pivot and not be locked in like we normally would be. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is true. And it's hard, I think, in this day and age, I find myself constantly having FOMO that we're not on to the next thing or not doing it. Even when you're like at the forefront of this tech and you're kind of like, oh shoot, this new video came out on LinkedIn and so did what? How'd they do that so quickly? And so, there's definitely finding that balance of what's real, what can you use, and just build, just see what you're able to make, stress test things out and see what you get out of it, because the space is changing so quickly.
It's kind of like holding a fire hose. You're just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much new tools all the time, and you're just like, oh my gosh. And there is that FOMO of like, oh, am I missing the right tool? Am I not? But I think it's a little bit of like the newsletters that you mentioned at the top. It's like trying to keep a pulse a little bit, because ultimately you're not going to be able to test all the tools, but it's a little bit of those newsletters and friends, and hopefully having a network that have tested things and know this one's hype, this one's cool, this one's somewhat useful, And so I think it's a little bit of filtering out the BS a little bit on some of these.
Yeah, and find like knowing what you're looking for, which problem you're trying to solve at that time, right? Because there's a bit of something that might promise, oh, build your whole game, like Preston said, don't go and just type in help me build this game, right? Like know that you have this challenge with 3D optimization or something super niche and specific and you want to solve that, or know that you have this challenge with player toxicity and chats in the group and you want to solve that problem. And you do end up, I guess, with a fairly complex tech stack, but we're used to that in games, and you kind of got to be nimble with what you're working with. And as we think about how this kind of continues to shape content, I know we've gone into the AI narrative and kind of those NPC characters that you might interact with, but Andy, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on kind of that contrast between these large social network kind of open world type games in VR that I think the industry is mostly used to and experiences, and maybe getting more on the one-off game side or closer to mobile gaming, or sitting down with a friend in mixed reality and playing chess or something like that? Like, do you think some of these AI tools in development are going to shift us away, maybe not away, but bring more alternatives in free-to-play gaming than maybe just kind of the low poly gorillas that you're running around and hanging out in this gorilla world with?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I have two thoughts on that. One, I do think that we're looking for, as we're getting into a space where there's like hyper distraction, we're looking for hyper connection. So we are feeling a lot more picky about where we're spending our time and our energy, whether it's physical, digital, or virtual.
Right.
And we're wanting to spend quality time with the people around us, but also quality time, new encounters, right? New meetings. So I do think there's still value in building in a larger platform where there is, masses of people, but then it's about how we find the right people and how do we have more quality experiences. So for example, take the physical example of a conference. There might be 70,000 people at a conference. Like, how do we actually meet the people we're supposed to and we want to? And then a lot of the best events are the side events, right? Like the evening meetup or the dinner, or like, little house party or something like that. So really, I'm actually really interested in AI in terms of like the art of gathering. A lot of us, when we go to these experiences or through events, is to network. So how can AI be used to find each other better? Like, one thing I was talking about the other night with a friend was like, can I just have an AI that talks to all the attendees, has a conversation with their AIs, and then I get a summary of what that chat would be, and then I get to engage being like, this would actually be a really conversation. Or find like the person who's in complete disagreement with me, because it's also about, not only chatting and being with people who agree with us, but who might challenge our perspective. So I'm all about like finding micro moments in these like macro moments and enabling just cooler moments between us. Because at the end of the day, whether it's gaming or doing business, humans interact and love other humans. And that's something, no matter how much technology you throw into the medium, is not going to go away. So how can we make sure that our experiences are bringing some kind of impact, whether that's bringing a sense of inspiration, did I learn something, did I meet someone, or did I grow like on a personal and professional level? Like, let's make sure we create experiences that actually matter and have that like internal wow factor.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think we underestimate some of the benefits of where it could be used to personalize things, push the right content to you. Obviously, it's being used very well in algorithms that Instagram and TikTok use to keep you hooked on whatever content makes sense and what's most relevant to you. But how do we get that in kind of this healthy connection in these virtual worlds and these spaces together, right? I mean, you like think about the potential of meeting up, like when you go to these conferences and you have these awesome interactions, but you want to show someone something, or you had this memory or you had this idea and you want to just be able to like kind of spawn that and pull it out and say like, is this what you're talking about? This is what I remember from that experience. And I think the virtual world opens up a lot of those doors and gives you that opportunity. But there's these tools need to be helpful in kind of reducing the noise and not making more noise, right? So that it can be kind of this more helpful interaction that you're looking for. So that makes a lot of sense.
I think there's one interesting thing Andy said as well, is like the people that may not agree with her. And I think as we begin to create AI characters, AI NPCs, even generated worlds, we're creating our own bubbles in a way of a world that we imagine. But I think it's important to bring in other people? How do we connect people I may not agree with? Whether it is in a virtual world. And so I think there's this interesting balance where we can create this just perfect world. It's like my, algorithms. We just begin to get tailored our content. So the same as we begin to create things, how do we get diverse type of content we're exposed to different people to connect with? Because I think connection is the key. And so I think that I don't have an answer to it, but I was just like, that's an interesting thought. Different perspectives is important.
We challenge ourselves, or else how are we going to grow? Like, just literally, we can't be surrounded with people or things that are in agreement with us, or else we're just not going to push past our own perspectives. Yeah.
And I know, like, when I've some of the AI avatars that we've created and interact with, like, it's always fun to have a chat and be surprised that, like, oh wow, I can't believe they cracked that joke or thought of that, or like that was really clever. It's so much more fun when I'm showing somebody else. Like, having that shared experience with that AI character also enhances it a lot. And so maybe it's not just like the single player RPG game to like enhance that one game. There's a time and place for that as well. But can you have these interactions where you were shocked at the story and the journey that this sort of AI avatar may have taken you on, but at least you get to share that with someone that is real as well, and you might have a deeper connection with. And who knows, maybe we get to a point where we're forming some of those deeper connections as well with these NPCs. And I know when you think about the types of characters that have come from Pixar and Disney and the likes, like, people have a very emotional attachment and positive sentiment to those types of characters.
And those characters can bring people together of different perspectives. If there's a mutual love of a character and experience through this character, there's this ability to bring people with different viewpoints together, which is interesting. Again, I don't have any answers. I'm just like, damn, could be really cool to explore. And maybe there's games or places, worlds, virtual worlds that allow this, which is cool.
Totally. Well, guys, this has been awesome. Oh, am I back? Okay. This has been awesome. I think we've gone a bit over time, and that the conversation took a lot of cool twists and turns there, and I really enjoyed that. I guess, Pat, I haven't been monitoring the Q&A all that well, but are there a couple that we want to surface up while we've got the panelists up here to ask the group?
You're muted.
Yeah, you are muted. I wasn't sure if that was just
now. You should be able to hear me. Hello.
Cool.
I know we're a little bit over. Jeff, Isaac, Andy, do you have 5 minutes for lightning round Q&A? Okay, awesome. I think we could take this in a few different directions. Andrew Woodbury, hey Andrew, started out with, do brands you work with on games care what AI tools you're using, or only care about the end result? I think that there's an opportunity to expand on that a little bit, and let's just talk about, like, how is AI helping with the end brand experience or the end game result? Maybe Andy, if you want to start with the brand, and then Jeff, maybe if you want to talk to the end result for the game. Andy, go ahead and start.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I get creators and developers tell me what they use and everything, it kind of overwhelms me. It's a bit like an artist telling me, oh, I use Photoshop and I did this in Canva. Yeah, for me, it's about the end result. If something is handcrafted, I think just like any product or service in our general space here in physical, it's kind of noted, all right, this was hand. But if it's not something of someone of like that story or that information is of knowledge, I don't want to know what kind of AI unless I'm really curious and we geek out about it. And I also don't want creators and developers to devalue themselves and be like, oh, I did this with this. You did this, the prompting has so much power. So I want us to kind of like move away, unless we're doing news and we're journalists. I don't think we always have to disclose what content, what tools we're using in our content creation.
Nice.
And then I think from our side, it's more of like, because LLMs are driven by data, is that data clean? And do we have the rights to it? Are we going to, is it lawsuits down the line? Is there, so there's still a risk in some ways with it on terms of us, but I do agree with Andy. It's like, I see a beautiful painting. I don't care if it was painted with Newton paints or Liquitex paints. It's beautiful. And so it's really about that final result, and making sure that data is usable, you know, and the source will allow us to sleep at night.
Awesome. Hey, Preston, just added you to the crew. I felt like you're, you know, lonely
What's up?
backstage, so I wanted to add you up to the actual stage.
I love it.
Cool. Maybe let's just go with Garth, since I think there's a lot of interest around the AI characters and the NPC. So he says, how do you frame the conversation with the customers about including an AI character, and how do you help them decide how much risk to take? I know we've had some fun conversations with different brands and their legal teams around this, which starts out like big creative ideas, smaller until the training data becomes basically just a branching narrative that has no AI in it whatsoever. So I guess who would like to take that question?
I can take a stab at it. One of the things we've heard from a lot of our developers is, especially when the LLMs started coming out back 3 years ago, and they become more accessible through platforms like Hugging Face. I think the immediate gut reaction or knee-jerk reaction was to, let's create an AI companion for our application, right? And increasingly, the conversation then swayed to, do we really need an AI companion? And what is this AI companion really doing in our experience, right? And so more and more, I think the conversation is shifting to becoming more intuitive AI companions that actually blend together with the key message you're trying to send from the product or application or experience you're trying to deliver, instead of force feeding that experience into whoever is the end user. And I think that's what brands have been increasingly aware of, the sort of positivities around AI, but also the wariness around too much AI in places where they are not very natural in.
Yeah, we were almost in like a new category of uncanny valley. And Jeff,
Mhm.
you'd know this from back in the day, like the effects, you know what I mean? Like we had this uncanny valley conversation, right? Of always like, it goes back to even like, yo, do we put Brad Pitt's VFX face in this shot, or do we actually just shoot him? You know what I mean? Like we're almost like hitting history again on uncanny valley, right? Kind of.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I think it is about that. Like, what value does it really add having an AI agent to my brand? Like, what am I just FOMO? Am I afraid I'm going to miss out if I don't have one, or is it truly adding something great?
Yeah. 100%.
Nice. I think so. I'm going to do one more question. Thank you, everybody, for staying over just a little bit here. And I'm going to kind of just take a few of them and wrap them into one final question. And maybe we could all just give like a quick sentence or two on it. But what makes like a good MR game and what doesn't? That's kind of a tough one, maybe. But like, if anybody has some thoughts, I think that maybe I've seen people like, what are the genres? What's a good marketing experience for MR? But maybe just a quick, what makes a good one? Maybe this isn't really need to be an MR.
Go for it, Isaac.
Yeah, I have I have
did
my
the deep
thoughts.
breath.
Yeah, I have my thoughts around this, but I think a good MR experience is one that really capitalizes on the physical surroundings and the data of the physical surroundings. And I'm talking about plain surfaces, like your coffee table in real life. How are you going to make use of that coffee table creatively in the digital space, right? And we've seen all sorts of crazy applications, from mini golf experiences on top of table, driving simulators on top of coffee tables. So those are taking the scale of the physical world, manipulating that, and making that a very creative experience. I think that's what excites me.
100%.
I
Yeah, I think this
Any other
it's an
thoughts?
interesting. Oh no, please, Jeff, get it.
No. I was just gonna. I think for me, it's one: is it fun? Two
Yeah,
is
facts.
why MR? And it goes to Isaac's point of like, what's the wish fulfillment of having this game in my space that doesn't allow any other format to do this. And so, it's about why MR and that wish fulfillment.
Yeah. I mean, there's like the cool thing is, I think in MR is that there's been a lot of really cool, interesting things that have been done in the mobile game space that that people have created this own genre from, right? There's new genres that are out there to be explored through the MR space. Nobody's figured it out yet, right? Like we are in this weird Wild West, cut to crackhead trying to make a game in a week. You know what I mean? Like fast, rapid development with AI, tie it all together. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That's my thought.
Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, for me, I'm really big on interactives. So please let me touch things, poke things. I want things to react. I want things to move. I want things to activate. Let me play outside of your intended action. So I know, like, for example, the golf. I know the ball has to go in the hole. But what if I, like, throw it against a wall? Is it going to bounce back?
Yeah.
Like, let me, reward me for my exploration. And then lastly, a big notion that I talk about are like the cardboard worlds and assets. And make sure that anything included in the world or in the space has a purpose. Like, I love the example, Isaac, of like the cafe. I've been in spaces where like the coffee doesn't work and I'm like, I can't pick up this cup, or the door doesn't open, or the whiteboard can't be drawn onto it. I'd rather a hyper minimalist and simple world than an overly complicated one, because I think at the end of the day, it breaks immersion. So yeah, let people have fun and
Facts.
weird fun, weird VR, MR fun.
Amazing.
Agreed.
Well, I think we're 10 minutes over, so I think we're gonna have to put a bow on it. But if maybe starting with Isaac, if anybody wants to reach out, say hello, is there any, and we can go from Isaac to Jeff and around. Where can people find you?
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on Unity discussions. I'm really active there. You'll probably see my name, my picture there. But definitely shout out to our mixed reality template if you are looking to get started with mixed reality development. We just released it a couple of weeks ago. We've heard great stuff, so definitely check that out if you're interested.
Awesome. Jeff?
Yeah, and for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, just keep an eye out for some exciting updates from Operative Games coming up soon. So
Nice. Andy?
Yeah, definitely find me on LinkedIn. And I host weekly meetups for XR developers and enthusiasts just to go explore cool games and experiences. So
Cool. Preston, where can anybody find you?
Yo, catch me at the next mixed reality event that we do. That's where you can catch me at the next one of these. I'll have another presentation ready.
All right. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Omid, I think you're a LinkedIn guy.
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Thanks everyone for showing up. This was great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, everybody. And if you want to get in touch with Rock Paper Reality, you can email us, hello@rockpaperreality.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. That's where we spend most of our time. But yeah, huge shout out to Isaac, Jeff, Andy, Preston, Omid. Thank you all for your time and your insights into what's happening in MR and AI. I know this was a very sought after and topic that people were excited about. And yeah, thanks everybody who joined. It was a huge turnout and more people than we were expecting, and can't wait for the next show. So thanks again, everyone.
thanks
Thanks, everyone.
everyone.
Thank you all.
I'm leaving on fireworks.
Bye, Ron.